Hello and welcome. We are talking today about HMOs. And Vishal, we start with the first question. The
Yes.
most investors I'm speaking to, when it comes to HMOs, they are treating HMOs like with the numbers game. That means they have the more rooms you have, the more money you have. So, where does the thinking go wrong in your perspective?
Um, when it comes to HMOs, I think it's always good to have those numbers because this is where you actually buy the property and you do your numbers that are you going to make a profit on this particular project or not. Okay. But when it comes to designing it, okay, we need to make sure we look after the property into its best way. Means you need to understand what the clientele you are attracting. If you're attracting professional people who are working 9 to 5, coming living in there, okay, or you looking it for a student accommodation sort of a thing that student comes in, so making sure there's a space for them to study after they come back from the university and some gathering areas and so on. So all of those things are very, very important when you actually making a design. So understanding the location of that project where it is, okay, understanding what kind of clientele you are attracting, okay, are very, very important. And even if you are looking for a contractors to come and stay, okay, those clientele are very, very different. So the material choice and things are needs to be very, very different for that. Okay. And every HMOs do come with their own guidelines. So every council will, the Manchester Council will have a different, okay, the council in Warrington and all, I mean, all the different council will have a different criteria to fill. The national standards for the space might be same, but but the other requirements which you need to fulfill can be different.
Okay. And what do you think is the most expensive mistake you've seen so far of an investor who is investing in an HMO?
Ooh,
Do you have an example that you said, okay, this cost him a lot of money or her?
um, when they try to do the HMO project very cheaply, okay, and I do understand why they go down that route is, but they've not used the latest electrical wires and things, so they've not spent the money in the rewiring, they're using the old wiring, then they are not spending money to having an interior designer on board, okay, because that does make a huge difference for any project, okay, especially the HMOs, and again the clientele you're trying to attract with that as well. And then they go like the occupancy of those rooms are very low, okay, so I would say about 75 to 80% of the time is only occupied and the remaining is empty because people are finding a better accommodation for the similar price, okay, out somewhere else. So the properties are going empty. And that's what people do not realize when they're trying to do this stuff cheaply. And because you're not going to be able to attract those side of clientele.
In your personal opinion, how do you think are the HMOs in future in the UK as well? Like, is this a still a good way to invest and to transfer the properties maybe into HMOs as well? If it's is there still a market for it in future?
Yes, definitely that is okay because the housing demand in UK is quite high, so people are still looking to live into the shared accommodation, and so okay, especially for as I said about people working away from the family and working in a city where they need accommodation for 5 days a week and things like that. So those things are definitely there, but lots of council are tightening the rules around the HMOs, okay, because of the quality of living and the standard they want the people to live in. So things needs to be done properly.
Okay. Do you think that maximizing the room is the obvious thing to do in an HMO, or like when, for example, is a small room more attractive than a big room? Or is there a minimum size you should have, or
Yes,
do
there
you
is a
have
minimum.
always the biggest, like, maximizing the room as possible, like how you would structure it?
Yeah, HMO, most of the council do come the square meterage allowance is about 10.2, okay, and you can have the smallest one up to 6.5 as well, okay, but that's a really, really small room. So personally, I won't recommend to have that sort of a room for, especially if you are into Manchester and things like that, because you're not going to be able to full that, you're not going to be able to sell that room much easier. Yeah, because there's loads of others in the markets are available.
Okay. What is there a option where you say, okay, that looks better on paper than it will really looks in real life? Like, especially when it comes to room size, obviously when it comes to numbers, if you
Yeah,
have smaller rooms, then you have more, you can rent it out different rooms. You
yeah,
know what I mean, in which direction I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
go.
absolutely. So the rooms which are actually into the loft, okay, if you see the into the 2D plan, they will never do a justice that how the room will actually look like, because of the height of the ceilings and things like that, and the roof light, the natural light coming in. So those are the one, when you look on a piece of paper, it looks like, oh, that's quite a small room. But when you actually do walk into the room, you go like, wow, that room does feel much, much bigger than what you see on a piece of paper.
Okay. If you would personally decide between one extra room and a better layout, what would you choose and why?
I will go with a better layout. Okay. And the reason being is, I'm a believer that, person who's going to be living in that space needs to be comfortable. If you just squeeze more room into the property, okay, and does not provide the amenity space. So when I was talking about the minimum requirement is about 10.2 square meter. If all of your rooms are 10.2 square meter, it means you don't have to provide an additional amenity space or additional living space within the property. But imagine somebody who's coming from work or student or whatever, okay, they only have their room, which is 10.2 square meter. They got nowhere other space in the house to go, because you've done a tick box exercise by saying all the rooms are 10.2. So I'd rather choose a layout on that option. So give in that particular house, I'll give a separate living space as well, so people can come out of their room and spend time into
Okay.
those.
So, in your opinion, when it comes to HMOs, are you saying fewer rooms can actually make more money?
Uh, it might not make more money, okay, or it might do it, because then you can actually your rent per room can be slightly higher to adjust that. For example, if you're charging £100 a room on that street as a normal, and you can possibly charge that 110, 120, because you are actually providing a little bit more space for the living space, and some other things to do in the house as well. So, and imagine that you have 5 rooms in the property rather than 6, so you actually make it equal anyway, and those properties will be much higher in demand as well.
Okay. In your opinion, what actually happens when kitchens and living areas are badly designed? What effect has it on the HMOs?
If they're badly designed, again, the councils do come up with their guidance that what the minimum sizes of the kitchen needs to be, okay, and amount of storage every person needs to
What the
have.
size is not a design question.
Sorry.
The size is not a design question. So when it's badly designed, obviously,
Yes.
it's a feeling for. So it's the size is a council thing.
Yeah.
It's a fact. The design is a soft thing, I would
Yes.
say.
Okay.
So
So
how
design.
is a badly designed effect in the especially the kitchen and the living area affects the HMOs?
Yes. Okay. And I can give you example, because we've done a project for a client in Newton Villa, and it was a mid-terrace property, and the kitchen was at the back of the house, and the living room was in the front, and there was a middle space, was a dining space. So initially, when the client started the work, I suggested the kitchen will go obviously where the small outrigger extension was originally, and he was happy with that layout. But I felt people living in the property will not be able to enjoy the two spaces together, because there's always going to be a door. It's very small squeeze. So I suggested the client to have a very small extension and break that wall out. Okay, and he took that idea on board. We did that, and that created the whole kitchen layout into an open plan space. So kitchen, and then it had an island looking out into the garden, and it had a separate living space as well. And that space looked absolutely fantastic after that.
Okay. When we are talking about extensions, usually you say like when you come into in a house,
Yeah.
you want to look through into the garden because
Yes.
you want to have this feeling. What feeling you are creating or you want to create for people that are going into an HMO?
Yeah. Ooh.
Ideally.
Ideally. Visually, when you actually step into that space, when you open the door, okay, in a residential property, it's very different, what you feel like it and things. The person should feel that space as a home rather than, oh, there's few more people living in it. Okay, so the color of the walls, the carpet, and the flooring makes all of that difference, that the person walks in and feels that space as home rather than a shared accommodation with 4 other people living in it.
Okay, this is really interior design focus. You as an architect, what would you change in an HMO than in a property and for an extension, like in a family property?
Yes. So coming back on that, I think it's the space we talked about into the kitchen. Okay, room's going to sell itself anyway. That the room has a nice bed, it's got the wardrobe space and the storage space, ensuite, and all that. But when you actually walk into the house, people will be able to see that, right, how big the kitchen is, and is there a space for them to sit down and eat and relax, and those things as well. So as an architecture design point of view, I would say those things are important as well.
Okay, so it's not directly how they feel when they come into it, but how they feel in these common areas.
How they feel
and in their room.
Area. Absolutely.
Okay. Most people focus, like always, on the build cost and everything. And almost no one talks about running the running cost. So basically, why do you think is this? And what do you think, like, where you have,
The running cost for?
the running cost for an HMO?
Yes.
So why do you think is that? And what is your perspective on that?
Ask me the question again.
The difference between build costs and running costs
Yes.
in HMOs. Where's the difference for you, and why do you think most people don't focus enough on the running costs? Because obviously an architect is part of the build costs and not of the running costs.
Yeah.
So.
People, I don't know if I'm answering your question properly or not. People look to do the self-managed HMO.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's why they get it terribly wrong, because they don't know what sort of things they need to put in place for people to come in, check out their lease agreements and, contracts and the cleaning arrangements and things like that. And if they're trying to do it themselves, okay, most likely they will miss few things out. So I always recommend to use a proper agent who specialize into HMOs. Not every agent will be able to do that for you. So there are some specialist HMO agents are in the market, okay, who will manage it for you. So spend the money with them, so you will have no hassle at all, okay, and you will get your money in time.
Do you have, what are they doing differently? Like, do you have an example in mind as well?
Yes, there's one example I know that is my client. We recently done the project for him, and he was running that as a HMO before. We gone and put more rooms, put more communal area, and did quite a lot of work into it. But that property was, I think, was a 6-bed HMO, and there was one room was. So when I went into the property, there was one room occupied by one of the tenant, and he was there for about 18 months without paying the rent.
Oh, wow. This is possible in an HMO.
Yep. and the client wanted to refurbish the property, but he could not go in because everything needed to be gutted down, and he had a court case, and he was fighting the case for nearly 18 months before he needed to get the person out because he was self-managing it. Yeah.
Okay.
If he would have used an agent, it would have been much easier process to go through. But
why would an agent be able to let this tenant go earlier?
Because of the agreements you will actually make. I don't know the ins and outs of what sort of agreement somebody will make, but my client did not have the proper paperwork that he's living in the property.
Okay.
So it took him time to evacuate this person out.
Okay. A lot of people think if I pass the regulations, everything is fine. Why is this statement not true?
There are guidance for the sizes of the rooms, sizes of the kitchen and the communal space and everything else. The second thing is a regulation, which is the building regulations, and this is how the emergency lightings work, the electrical stuff is worked, the escape distances, smoke alarms, and things like that. Those are all your regulatory stuff. Okay, so people do convert properties under the permitted development. It's not as simple as that. You still need to do the building regulation part of that to make sure you comply with the regulations as well.
Okay. Where do you see compliance actually limiting a project because it was handled too late?
Yeah. When you look to I think it's coming back to the previous question. When people do the project under the permitted development, then they feel like because it's under the permitted development, I don't need a permission from the council. Yes, you don't, but you still need to have the building regulation certificate done because you're using the property for a different use. And that's where people do not understand and go and get the work done. And then later on, they do find out and saying, oh, we do not have the right documents for it. Because when they're looking to refinance the building and things, then they only realize that. And I've dealt with many clients like that as well, where they've done the work, they've got the people living in, and now they want to refinance, and the mortgage company is asking them, saying, can you give us the planning documents? Can you give us the building regulation? And I go like, oh, we haven't got any of those because we did everything under permitted development. So we're trying to go back, and then when we get the building control involved in, then they go like, okay, smoke detector is not here, this thing is not there, the correct hinges is not on the windows and the doors and things like that. So there's more costing later on.
Okay. There are obviously standards nowadays for HMOs. They are matching the needs of the tenants. They are basically in the HMOs. In your opinion, when we think a little bit like 10 or 20 years ahead,
Yeah.
what do you think? Are there standards changing? So build standards are changing. In which way they would change? In your opinion, it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
So no right or wrong.
Yeah. I feel the minimum standard for the rooms will be changing in the future. I think 10.2 square meter, which is the minimum allowance at the moment, is okay, but I don't think it's big enough for people to live and breathe in that space. I think it needs to be a little bit more spacious. So I can see that those things, regulations and things, might come a little bit more tighter, or they need a bit more areas on those rooms.
Okay. When it comes to resale, is there when an investor is obviously having an HMO, usually they have it to keep it and not reselling it. But when it comes to resale, what do you think makes this HMO a little bit more difficult to resell because it's poorly designed? What would that be?
Again, permitted development. Permitted development comes in quite a lot, is because it's not been designed. Okay, somebody just gone ahead and go like, okay, minimum sizes rooms, this, that, there's no en suites. And when they're looking to sell it or refinance it or do whatever, then somebody will be asking you all the paperwork, okay, and then you need to satisfy the person that how long you've been using it, which guidelines you have actually used, how old this HMO is, and if you do not have the right paperwork at that time, that how, because the standard changes over the time. So you can't just say, oh, this standard was 5 years ago and that's how it is, because you've got nothing to prove that you've been using this as a HMO for the last 5 years. So having those documents are must. So if anybody asks you in the future saying how long you've been using it, when did you apply for it, this, that, all the paperwork is with you. Makes the process much easier.
Imagine you're talking to someone who never invested in an HMO before and wants to start now.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing he has to do? So he found a property that they have an agreement, put an offer in, offer is accepted. Might be not there, like there might be some changes needed as well in the in this building to make it as an HMO. What would you recommend them to do the next step? What would be the next steps for them?
Yeah. So I've got a few clients at the moment where they are purchasing buildings left, right, and center, and they send me the link and say, look, it's on a Rightmove or some other website, and I'll quickly have a quick look and say, look, in this space, without doing so, I'll just not doing the work for them at that time, just giving them some guidance and saying, look, without doing too much work within the property, you can get that into a 4-bed HMO or 5-bed HMO, depending on the size. Or if you have the money and you want to do it, if it's in the right area, you should look to extend it, go into the loft and do something else, and you get more rooms out of that. So when you are purchasing or in a mode of purchasing it, just be in contact with us so we can just give you a guide that what you can actually do with the property. And one of the best examples which I've given you many times is a client who bought a 4-bedroom mid-terrace property, and we converted that into an 8-bed HMO. Okay, we needed to go through the planning hoops and things like that, but just a simple call, he actually made it to me before he initially thought he can do this under the permitted development, which he was able to do it, but not 8-bed HMO, which we were able to give it to him later on.
So the first step would be look for an architect and get the regulations in and the permissions in.
Yep.
Is this, and then you need a team of you need a builder.
Yes,
who else should be in your team if you do it the first time? Like if this person has no idea what to do next, like what would be the next step?
A designer, somebody like us who can look after the project in terms of designing it. Okay, then if it's an
interior designer.
No, a designer, which is us. Okay, so it's an architecture designer, us. And then if it depends if it needs a planning permission or not, we might need a planning consultant to be involved in. Okay, and after that you need your build team. Okay, you can outsource that to somebody, or if you have your own build team, it's fine. Or if I think your question is that somebody's never done it before, so finding a builder who actually done the work before, done some HMO work before, because there are lots of things we need to be done differently doing a residential project. So having those on board, and then an interior designer is quite important on the project. Then when you're actually taking the photographs, putting in the market and make sure you do the proper staging of the property. So putting the right furniture in right places and saying how the property will actually look like. And then using an agent, a proper HMO agent who can look after your property.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And is there anything on HMOs you would love to add, because I didn't ask it at the moment, which is important for every HMO investor?
Putting me on the spot.
Always.
No, can't think of that at the moment. I think you asked me enough.
Amazing. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then we see us to the next topic.
Thank you very much.